There are a lot of moments where George thinks that he is being a good father. And guys, before anything, let me just tell you something. This is another example of how George treats Max way better than he ever did Carmen. The episode in question today is season 2, episode 3, the show Dyslexic. It's obviously like a little play on words. Dyslexia, you mix up your words. This is probably the first time you see how involved George is in Max's life. So let's break it down. As always, guys, if you are new to the channel, hit the like, drop a comment, say hello. I'm always here basically every day. If you guys have any suggestions on episodes that you guys want me to cover, let me know. I would be more than happy to. Let's do it. So, to start off the episode, Max basically gets a note from school from his teacher. The note basically says that they want a parent teacher conference. It's like a parent teacher night. But as Angie is going through the bag, she sees a note in Max's backpack that basically says the teacher wants to talk to George and Angie, basically discussing Max's behavior. This note, however, is forged by Angie's signature that the teacher later on brings up. As it turns out, Max is already acting out a little bit, and he actually faked Angie's signature because he did not want to tell Angie and George that he's getting in trouble at school. Essentially, what's happening is Max is struggling at school, and the teachers want to have him tested because she believes that he might be dyslexic. And it's not really that he is not trying, it's just that he is having so much more difficulty than a regular student would. Now, this is where Angie and George disagree because Angie is all for it. George is not, because this basically means that Max would be placed in special ed classes, and George understands what that would be like because he struggled in school. Basically, that also implies that kids are going to pick on you, you're going to be having to try way harder, and all in all, it's just going to be a reputation killer, even though it's probably for the best. So to just kind of cover everything, it's not because he doesn't love Max. I think he just cares about Max, but in a different way than Angie does. So basically, that night, they have a conversation with Max and they confront him about forging the signature. George basically tells Max, hey, be honest, have you actually been trying? Because your teacher thinks that you need to be placed in special ed. Max basically tells them that, hey, look, I haven't, but I will because I don't want to do special ed. And George lets him off the hook just like that. Angie obviously thinks that that wasn't fair for him to make a big decision for Max, as she is literally standing right next to them. But George explains even further that that's something that would probably ruin Max's reputation as he grows up. Obviously, Angie is not looking at that. She is just looking to actually help the boy out the best way she can. But this is classic early season George. George makes decisions for Angie without consulting because he thinks that he may know a little bit better. He thinks Angie is more emotional and he is being logical. Now, this is something that I want to point out because when Carmen made mistakes in the early seasons, George was way rougher about it. He spied on her, he stalked her, he overreacted, he overcorrected. Just think about Duncan in the first season, and though he was right, he came off way too strong right away. See, with Carmen, George parents from ego and fear. But with Max, he just kind of sees it as he's struggling and I need to be more patient with him. But for some reason, George sees himself more in Max, and that's why he goes a little bit softer on him. Now, this is where George has probably one of the biggest growth moments in the whole entire series. See, he realizes that if Max doesn't take these classes, he is going to grow up his whole entire life thinking that he is dumb, and no parent wants that. So he changes his mind. And even though Max faces him with defiance, George understands that he needs to stand his ground and make him realize that this decision is going to be better for Max long run. You don't see that a lot in the later seasons. But this is also yet another thing that you don't see throughout the whole entire show with Carmen. You see it maybe a few times, but it's after George colossally messes up. And that right there is a difference. This is why this episode feels way different. And there is obviously one similarity. George fights because he thinks he's right in all these situations. But with Max and Carmen, it is different. See, with Carmen, he is fighting to be the only answer. With Max, he is fighting more to protect. With Carmen, it's about control. With Max, it's about understanding. With Carmen, he reacts to behavior. With Max, he reacts to vulnerability. There is a huge distinction in both of these behaviors. See, he sees himself as little George in Max, and this is why that connection is way different. George had a rough upbringing, so he thinks maybe if he makes it better for Max, he'll somehow feel better. He doesn't understand Carmen because, well, Carmen basically represents everything that rejected him. This is also why this episode feels different than later seasons. Early on, he's raw, he's insecure, he is still carrying trauma from his childhood, but it's a lot more present. The later seasons kind of lead more into exaggerated comedy and obviously conflict. But here in season two, we're watching a man who is still trying to figure out how to break those generational trauma. And for once, he does. He doesn't actually pass it down, he breaks it. It's just with one kid, though. As I always state, this episode isn't about what the title usually says. It's not about dyslexia. It's about pride, childhood trauma. It's about a father not letting his past ruin his child's future. And in doing so, George becomes a better parent to Max in one episode than he does to Carmen throughout various seasons. Here's a real question though. Was he better to Max because he matured or because Max reminded George of himself? And if Carmen somehow reminded George of who he was, would he have treated her differently? Let me know down below. As always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, show some support, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Goodbye.